Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a little response to the some 2 hour long State of the Union last night. Lots of rehashing of the greatest hits, much of which we've heard over the past months. Not a lot of talk about new policies and what to expect over the course of the coming year. And the reactions are pretty much as you expect. People that love him say this was an extraordinary speech, best ever. Everyone's on their feet. People that can't stand him think that this is just a disaster and have never seen anything so horrible. And you don't learn very much from all of that. But given all of that, the best way to look at the speech is to put it in the context of how Trump is actually doing. And here the answer is, at this stage in the presidency, not great. Why? Because on the biggest issue that matters the most to Americans, the economy, the top line numbers are pretty good. The markets, of course, are doing fantastically well. And for those Americans that make a lot of money in the markets, they're happy on the back, especially of reduced tax rates, which they appreciate from the Trump administrations. At this point, also, you see reasonable growth numbers, though lower than they were in the last year of the Biden administration. But inflation continues to be higher than people would like. Affordability is a big problem. And Trump saying that this is the best economy in the world doesn't make it so for the average American that doesn't feel that way. New job numbers pretty soft. Oil prices, gas prices, which you talked about, are indeed comparatively low. And a part of that is that the Americans have leaned into producing more oil and the regulatory environment that has facilitated that. But outside of gas, prices are pretty high. Mortgages are pretty high. Real estate is pretty high. And all of this means that the amount of spending that is happening for most Americans is lower than they'd like. It's lower than they would want to be able to consume for themselves and their kids, but they feel stretched. And most of the consumption is happening from the top 10%. And so economically, if Trump were talking to the top 10%, the speech would land. But he's talking to most Americans, and in that regard, it really doesn't. Tariffs, he continues to lean into tariffs. There's a big fight with the Supreme Court sitting right in front of him, and some of them voted in favor of his use of IEPA for the tariffs. 3 of the justices, 6 did not. He's angry about it. He castigated them and pointed them out individually. None of this is a surprise. But the interesting point is that tariffs aren't popular in the United States because most Americans understand that it means that they are paying more for goods. And this is being passed on. Not all of it. Some of it's being swallowed by the corporations, but it is increasingly being passed on by the companies. And that means that good prices are stickier. And Trump wants to keep using those tariffs. And so you're not going to see significant relief in the near term, all of which means that it's going to be hard. And the fact that the Supreme Court has now pushed back on Trump also means that he's running out of time before the midterms because he's got 150 days with this untested 10%, maybe 15% tariff on everybody. And then he needs investigations to go sector by sector on countries on the back of that. As he's pushing deals forward, that takes time. And that means that, with the environment you're in right now in terms of tariffs and trade is largely going to be the environment you're in as you get closer to the midterms in November. And that does not look good for Trump in terms of the House. Now, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said very clearly yesterday that if Trump loses the House, if the Republicans lose the House, it's basically the end of this stage of the Trump presidency. And that's a big deal for him to say. Now, he's saying it with the idea of, hey, everybody, you got to get out and vote, even though Trump isn't directly on the ballot. But there is clearly an understanding from many Republicans that if the vote were today, they're losing the House. And if trajectory continues the way it looks presently, they're losing the House. And then the Republicans start their primary for the presidential election, and that doesn't look great for Trump. So that's where they are right now. There were obviously a couple of big applause lines when you bring the U.S. gold-winning hockey team, the men's, that's going to lead everybody pretty much to stand up and applaud. And it was an extraordinary match. And no, I don't make much of the fact that the women didn't show, because it does look like it was mostly about scheduling and less about trying to make a political statement. And I don't think that the hockey players were frankly trying to make a political statement and showing up either. I think they're athletes, and most of the people in the room responded to it appropriately in that way. So it was nice to have at least a bit of this that wasn't all about politics. On the foreign policy side, which of course is the part that is closer to my heart, that I'm closest to, again, not much news being made. I mean, the Iranians being put on notice, but as they have been, and the military equipment in the region certainly says a lot more than anything that Trump had to say in the State of the Union. Those that thought that maybe he would use this as an opportunity to attack, not so much. Prime Minister Modi in India, definitely, I don't think you'd have an attack until after that. Also, you've got these ongoing talks on Thursday between the Iranians and the U.S., probably intermediated by Oman, not direct. We'll see if they go anywhere. So far, it doesn't look that way. So an imminence to strikes increasingly looks very likely, but not quite today, tomorrow, more likely Friday over the weekend. But still, that's real soon. So we're going to be talking about it almost certainly. Otherwise, I mean, lots of exaggeration, lots of things that just weren't true. The inflation numbers he talked about. The one that I find the most kind of ludicrous is the fact that Trump says that 35 million people would have died were it not for him. And he says this is what the Pakistani prime minister has told him. And so isn't that great? And frankly, by the way, if it were true that because of Trump, 35 million people didn't die that were going to perish, we should absolutely all support him under any circumstances. That would be a truly extraordinary accomplishment for the president. Except it's not remotely true. And it's so sad, frankly, because Trump actually played a meaningful, not the decisive role, but a meaningful role, particularly Marco Rubio, in helping to get to a ceasefire between Pakistan and India that have fought in conflicts before and are likely to fight in them again. But it's dangerous. It's over the borders, and people were getting killed, and there were rockets, and there were jet fighters on the back of a terrorist attack that killed a lot of people in India. And that is a big deal. And he legitimately deserves some credit for this. But he makes a farce of it by, sort of taking it to the nth degree. And of course, all of this from Pakistan, as well as the Nobel Peace Prize that they nominated him formally for, because his ego requires it. And that remains a big problem for the United States, is the fact that on so many individual issues, the president is personally advancing policies that supports him, as opposed to the country as a whole. And we see that here. We see that on Greenland. We see that on so many individual issues around the way he responds to the elections and is preparing for the next. And that is a distraction, but it also undermines the strategic position of the United States. I mean, heck, it's TikTok with the Chinese, as opposed to focusing on the strategic challenges and competition. All of this stuff is deeply problematic and makes it harder. I mean, I really wanted to be wildly supportive when President Trump opposed insider trading for Congress, which is something that obviously they should not have the legal ability to do. And he pointed out rightly that, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't be supporting that because, she and her family have benefited greatly, it appears, on the basis of their ability to take advantage with their portfolio. But from the political insights that they have. But of course, all of this falls really flat when it comes from a president who personally and whose family is making unprecedented amounts of money directly from abusing their position of power. And the fact that others have done so to a smaller degree before is true, but does not in any way justify it. And we're all allowing the politics of this to get in the way of what is systemic abuse of the representation of a democratic political system that is not equivalent for the people that are voting and the people that are deciding. And that's why, of course, Trump didn't bring up Epstein during his 2 hours. He had plenty of time in the speech to do it, but he doesn't want to, even though if it's all about, sort of just the Democrats that have done these illegal things and not the Republicans, you'd think it would be all he's talking about. But of course, that isn't the case. It's more about protecting people that are on your side, that have power and that have money. And again, that's the big takeaway here is that the system is not getting fixed in ways that would make average Americans feel like it's more legitimate and more legitimized. And ultimately, that is going to take a crisis and maybe more than one before you see it turn around. The State of the Union has done nothing in that regard. I don't expect that the midterm elections are going to do much in that regard, but that's where we are. So I'll talk to you all real soon.